So one of the big questions about making disciples is who is God sending me to? Who are the people that I have opportunity to engage with and share the good news with? Who are those people? And so we want to talk about answering that question a little bit today. And I want to just start with a foundational principle here that's going to guide our whole conversation. And the principle is this. Jesus says, for the harvest is plentiful. One of the older translations says, for the fields are white unto harvest. And this idea is that there are many, many people, and it's crucial to be able to understand this and believe this and let this guide your actions and your prayer and your heart, that there are many, many people all around us in this world, that the Holy Spirit is already working in their lives. God is like going ahead of you. Jesus is at work ahead of you in their lives. And so we have the opportunity to find people that may be this close or maybe not this close. Maybe there's quite a bit of distance still before they're ready to respond. But the Lord has prepared people. The harvest is plentiful. So whether you live in Beirut or Baltimore, whether you're in a rural setting or an urban setting, whether it's postmodern, millennial, I don't care the specifics. It doesn't affect the fact that Jesus says that the harvest is plentiful. That means there are many, many people that God is already working in. And so the question is, who are they specifically? How do we find them? And so I want to give you a couple thoughts on the first sort of category here is to think about the people that you live, work, and play with. And this is sort of the no-brainers. In fact, I'm not going to spend a long time on this. There's a video called Oikos Mapping that you can also access here on the development plan, and it's going to help you figure out where your circles of influence are and the people that God has put around you that very naturally can be bridges through those relationships for sharing the gospel. So, obviously think about your neighbors, think about your family. Ask yourself, are there people that I can already have a relationship with that I can share the gospel with and invite to know the hope of Jesus in their lives? Are there coworkers? Or maybe if you're a student, are there classmates that I can share the gospel with? And sometimes here's the thing. One of the downsides, the upside of the people that you already have relationship with is that you already know them. There's mutual respect and rapport that's built up, and hopefully you've already, I'm going to say, earned the right to share the gospel with many of these folks. But the downside is that sometimes the more investment we have in a relationship, the longer we've known them and the more trust we have, the more that's riding on that relationship, the less willing we are to jeopardize that relationship by sharing the gospel. Because if there's rejection, it can sort of affect us more, and we can feel like we're really gambling our whole, or jeopardizing that whole relationship on how they respond to the gospel. So it's a double-edged sword. As you think about the people you're closest with, the people who are in places of influence, the people that you already have influence with, there's this perceived risk anyway of what if they reject me. So the other category is the people that you're going to sort of, I'm going to say, casually encounter. And of course, we don't just subscribe to this being a casual encounter. Sometimes it's going to be a providential encounter. God's going to bring someone into your life for a specific moment, a divine appointment, if you will. Now, I would argue that you ought to have the confidence in the Lord and the dependence upon Him to take this risk and to speak and share and point people towards the hope of Christ, beginning with the people that you live, work, and play with, but not excluding the people that you casually encounter. Now, who do I mean by these folks? Let me give you some ideas. I would think about Uber drivers. If you've never used Uber, it's sort of like a taxi. It's an app-based ride service on your phone. And I have had multiple really good conversations with Uber drivers. Like, Now, if you just are on your phone and you're just answering email, or you're not engaging, or you're taking a nap, of course, you may not have an opportunity. But you know what? You're in a car for whether 5 minutes or half an hour with someone. Like, what an opportunity just to exchange a little bit of life and share a little bit of your testimony. I bet I've prayed with 4 or 5 Uber drivers over the last couple of years. Another opportunity is Airbnb. These are options you may not usually think of, but like if you, I just share this from personal experience. If Airbnb, it's like a hotel except it's with real people, and not just a corporation. And so Airbnb is where you stay in someone's home, and often they're not there. But if you do meet them, like in our case, earlier this year, our Airbnb host came out, met us, and walked us from the house to the car, showed us around how the locks worked, all this. And in that short span of a time, she asked me what I did. I said, I'm a pastor. And she said, what kind of pastor? And I said, well, I'm a pastor of the kind of church that believes that God wants to have a relationship with every single person on earth. And she literally said this, no exaggeration. She said, I need you to come over to our house and tell my family about this relationship with God thing. And so that afternoon, I went over and shared with her family. There were like 7 people, 3 generations, and we had tea and snacks. And I told the story of the prodigal son. So these are unconventional kinds of avenues, paths for sharing the gospel. But think about this. Think about it could be anything. It could be Little League. It could be a sport that your kids are playing in. It could be an adult sport that you participate in, a club, a hobby. It could be one of the ones, just for me, is my daughter's ballet practice. I love Wednesday nights when they go to ballet practice, because the kids practice and the parents sit around in this waiting room. So you're there for like an hour, and I'm not going to lie, I'm not 100% of the time focused on the others. A lot of the time I bring a book, I'm doing my own thing. But over the course of weeks, there have been multiple opportunities to engage with people. One of the moms was crying one day, and I just came over to her and I said, listen, couldn't help it over here. I know you're going through a tough week. Look, I'm a person of prayer. Would you mind if I prayed with you? And that one prayer led to everyone knowing that I was a person of peace, a person of faith, and that they could come and ask for prayer and other things. And so I sort of became the unofficial chaplain of the ballet waiting room. And so I bet I talked to 4 or 5 parents over the course of several months in meaningful ways. Don't minimize or count out those opportunities that God may bring through casual encounters. 2 more. Think about the people that you engage with at a consumer level. The server who's waiting on your table, your barista. There are often opportunities to learn their name, ask a question, and maybe share a word or two that could point to Jesus. And if a conversation opens up, then you can go further. There's another video on going and sowing that's going to give like tips on what do you talk about with these folks. But today we're just focusing on who, and I'm trying to get some of those juices flowing for you. I want to just mention one last story. A few months ago, I was in the Dominican Republic. I was coming home from a church visit. It was 4 a.m. And as I was leaving the hotel, there was a police blockade. And so they waved me over. 4 a.m., not a lot of people were out doing good things at that time of the night. And so they were suspicious, and they were probably a little crooked. They pulled me out of the car. They asked me for my paperwork. They were doing a brief search of the car. And then they asked what I did. And I said, I'm a pastor. And it may not work that way here in the States, but in the DR, that still carries quite a bit of weight. So these 2 policemen, they like snapped to attention as soon as they heard I was a pastor. They were buttoning up their shirts and kind of combing back their hair, and they gave me back my papers, and they said, oh, we're so sorry, that we stopped you. Now, when I first got stopped, I assumed that the police stop would be a nuisance, an inconvenience, and a delay. What I didn't see was that it might have been an opportunity God was creating for me to share with these guys. And so right there, as soon as they responded this way, like the light went off, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute, maybe this is an opportunity God's created for me to minister to them. So I said, listen, you guys, look, maybe I'm not here just by accident. I know that you stopped me, and maybe you had other intentions to, get a bribe or whatever. But listen, maybe God has sent me here to tell you that he has not forgotten about you, one, and two, that he expects you to serve justly and to be representatives of justice. And so I want to pray with you. Can I do that? And these two guys, they just got all ready, and they bowed their heads, and they said, that'd be such an honor. And so they stood there, and I put my hands on their shoulders and just prayed for these guys that 30 seconds earlier had been shaking me down and pressuring me. So you never know which casual encounters are going to create an opportunity to share the gospel. And the final thing I want to share on this same point is really crucial. And I want to put it this way. Don't pre-decide for people whether or not they're going to respond. Sometimes we look at a group of people or at a person, and we sort of make up our own minds about whether or not they're interested or hungry in God. And so I want to encourage you not to do that. Like, don't count someone out before they've had an opportunity to hear the good news or to respond to it. And I want to tell you the story of my friend Gabe, but I want to give you this concept. What's a better way than sort of prejudging whether or not people are interested? And it's this simple idea that I picked up from a book somewhere: filter with the gospel. Let the gospel be the truth that they respond to, not your own preconceived notions of whether or not they're interested. So for me, this became really clear with the story of my friend Gabe. Now, Gabe did not start out as my friend. In high school, this is going back a few years, he was this scary kid, the kid that dressed with all the chains and the gothic makeup and the black shirts. I mean, he was a scary kid that you would avoid if you saw him coming towards you down the hallway. And I never had any significant interaction. If you would have asked me, I would have said Gabe was the last person in my school who ever would have been interested in Jesus and the good news and the hope of Christ. Never would have thought that he would be interested. But one day, Gabe and I got paired as and driver's ed together. So we're sitting next to each other in the back of the Sentra. We're learning how to drive, and then each one of us got turns at the wheel. And over the course of like several days, as we were learning to drive together, this unexpected small friendship came about. I realized that he was a human being, that behind all the black and all of the makeup, like this is a real guy with a sensitive heart and really some anxieties in his life. And so I said one day, I kind of worked up the nerve, and I said, Gabe, listen, I'm going to youth group after we're done here today. Would you like to go with me? And I was blown away by Gabe's response. He said, I have been waiting for so long for someone to invite me to church. I would love to go with you. I never would have imagined this about Gabe, but that Wednesday night, he went to church, went to youth group. He actually went up to the altar, and in a tearful response that I'll never forget, he gave his life to Christ. So don't prejudge who's going to be open or who isn't. Filter with the gospel. Look for the people that you live, work, and play with, and be open to those casual encounters. That's some of how to look for the who that God is preparing you to make disciples with.